Hey, everybody, it's me, Robert Phoenix, and I am back once again with another edition of the Friday FARcast. And this is where I get to speak with other people and talk with them and share ideas and share this virtual space, our temporary autonomous zone. And today I'm really excited to bring on Jock Doubleday, who is living within the general proximity of Central Texas. And I first discovered Jock's videos when I was starting to dip into Tartaria. And I found this really interesting video on Enchanted Rock, which is, you can see it's right behind me. And I thought, man, this guy's got some interesting angles here on what appears to be a giant kind of mountain rock that just kind of erupts out of the landscape here in Central Texas. But with further examination, might be something a little bit different. So then I found some of Jock's other videos, particularly one or two from Bosnia, where I think he was kind of exploring the pyramid of Bosnia. So I've been aware of his work for a while, and I've been wanting to get him on the show for a while. And now he's taken all of this to another level, and he's exploring this idea of the terraformation of continents. And we're going to get into that a lot deeper. But before we do, before I bring Jock on, there's two things I need to share with you. Number one, our sponsor of the show, True Hemp Science. Right there, there's part of your goodie bag that you get when you spend $100 or more at truehempscience.com and type in 15MINS. That's truehempscience.com. Support our friend Chris over there in Austin. Good dude, good product. You will be satisfied. And the other thing I need to talk about is the event that's happening in October here in the Hill Country. It is the Harvest Moon event. We're going to have Mario from Symbolic Studies with us. DJ Pebblestone will be with us. I'll be there. And hotel rooms are going fast, right? So the hotel, if you want to go, if you haven't signed up for a room, you need to sign up for a room. And all you got to do is call the Inn of the Hills, and the number is there on the link inside the show notes. So paying for the event is great. Appreciate it. You need to get a room. And if you need to share a room, reach out to Tom, and he will take care of that. Okay? And that's the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th here in Kerrville at the Inn of the Hills, where we all get together and harmonize and, just hang out and be. All right. Speaking of hang out, let's bring it on. The man of the hour, Mr. Jock Doubleday. Hello once again, Jock.
Hello, Robert. How's it going?
Well, it's going pretty well since the last 5 minutes that we spoke. But yeah, it's great to have you on the show. And as I mentioned in the intro, I found your Enchanted Rock video. I don't know when that was, like maybe about 4 or 5 years ago or something. And I thought, wow, this is really fascinating. And I kind of picked up on your vibe as a person. I thought, well, this guy's interesting as well as the material. So here we are, probably about 4 or 5 years later, and you're a guest. And so I wanted to have you give people a sense of who you are, where you came from, how you got interested in all this. You do have a bit of a background as kind of a script writer and some Hollywood touch points in your life. So the floor is yours, Jock. Who the hell are you?
Thanks, Robert. I really appreciate you and your wide-ranging channels. It's amazing how you grab intel and info from so many different places, and you're a place where people can come and get their ideas out. It's fantastic. So thank you for having these platforms.
Yeah, it keeps me busy and helps keep me sane as well. I have a vested interest in this.
Yeah.
So
well,
thank
you. Absolutely. Well, I started writing plays when I was young. If 30 is young, I was 29 or 30 years old, and that's been my main love. And then I started writing screenplays, and I did live in LA for a year, but I was never able to sort of break into Hollywood. And now, with all we've learned about Hollywood, I'm really glad of that fact. So I've got tons and tons of scripts sitting on my hard drive gathering dust, both for the theater and for the big screen. But I've been getting involved in archaeology since 2011 when I volunteered for the Bosnian Pyramids project in Visoko, Bosnia. Spent 3 months there, and then decided to return. Semir Osmanagic, the discoverer of the pyramids, said, why don't you come back in 2014 and make some short scientific videos for the foundation that oversees the excavation in the complex, which is called Archaeological Park Foundation. And that's based in Sarajevo, and they oversee excavation in Visoko, Bosnia, where the pyramids are. So I did that and then stayed on, and I think it was month 17. I was there for 23 months total, but in month 17, I went down to the riverbed, and I thought, I wonder if the riverbed is the foundation of these structures that find themselves alongside of the Foinica River, because that would make sense. Otherwise, if you're setting your pyramids on the earth next to a river that could flood and take them down from the side, then you're not doing smart building. So I thought maybe they just built the pyramids from the riverbed as the foundation and then built them up. And then the pyramids would be joined through the riverbed as paired structures across the river, and it'd be super strong because the water would always have to go over the megastructure. It could never get under the megastructure. It could never get under the pyramids. So I went down in expecting to find concrete. Well, what I found was concretized clay, and it was thin layers, something that we would never think of doing, I don't think. I mean, the LA Canal is this smooth, beveled structure that's made of concrete. In Bosnia, the way they move water was in this particular case, was to build thin, hard-baked claystone layers that were adhered to each other. And that was the riverbed. And then as soon as they got up a couple of meters from the depth of the riverbed, if you go across a couple meters up, they started to use soft earthquake mitigating layers, really thin layers. And so water,
you were able to notice that there was a difference in terms of the layering with what they were doing. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, because they didn't, presumably, I mean, I didn't get the memo from the ancients to the ancients, but presumably they didn't want the strong action of the river water to take out their soft earthquake mitigating layers in the main part of the riverbed. It was only when it got up to a certain point they started to make really thin layers. They would still kind of be protected by this hard structural layers that they alternated with. Those alternating hard and soft layers. And then the soft earthquake mitigating layers start to get deeper and thicker as you go up the hills and as you go up the pyramids. But it's the same building throughout the complex, is alternating hard structural layers composed of a baked clay stone next to another baked clay stone next to another baked clay stone, and then packed in with soft earthquake mitigating clay in between the stones and on top and below. So it's alternating hard and soft clay, pure clay. So that's all the structures are made that way. And then on the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, there's also an added layer, actually several layers of concrete that they added to I think, press down this clay to create a piezoelectric effect where there's a compression of this material and it can create a scalar field. So Ken Rolla goes into that in a video called Blueprint for Existence that I shot for Semir back in the day. So it all goes back to the genesis of the continental terraforming or the continent building theory came from that river.
Interesting. Wow. So you have taken that light bulb going off in your head, and then you have rooted around and explored other places, particularly even here in Central Texas, where you have found, if not the same thing, but similar structures or striations. Is that true?
Right, exactly. So, well, for instance, in Central Texas, where we find ourselves,
Yeah.
there's a lot of you're either probably going to find gypsum or limestone. And so, what I've found here near where I live is primarily gypsum alternating hard and soft layers of gypsum. So it's the same sort of earthquake mitigating building that they did in Texas as they did in Bosnia. It's just that they used gypsum instead of clay. And so you've got these soft, chalky layers, and then really hard, strong, structural, baked gypsum block next to another baked gypsum block with the regular right angle side to it, right next to another one, and a little bit of roughness in between, presumably because in an earthquake, the roughness of the sides of the sections that are next to each other would abrade, and instead of slipping, like if it was a Greek or Roman smoothness to these blocks, they would just slip in an earthquake and fall. But there's a roughness to them. There's a regularity, but there's a roughness to the texture of the sides. So I think it's not only is it keeping the hills strong, but it's also creating a slight bit of dust that then creates soil. So earthquakes create soil for the foliage. Instead of destroying your structures that you spent so much time building,
That's really interesting. So I remember seeing you wading around these riverbeds here in Central Texas. And there were two things that crossed my mind. Was number one, you were literally pointing out these rectangular slabs. And it's, finding right angles in nature is very, very difficult. And you're finding them consistently. So that was the first thing that grabbed my mind. The second is, this is right under our feet, and we're not even aware of it.
Right. Well, this is the thing. If your audience has hung in this long, and I think that they probably have since they're used to alternative ideas, but I'm hoping that people who just come up on your channel today, and this is the first video they see, I hope they hung in there for long enough to get this little bit of information, which is, because anybody can dispute what I just said about anything. Bosnia, Texas, they can just say, oh, it's nonsense. It's a playwright talking about geology. What does he know? And just turn off. But if you just hang in for 2 seconds, this is indisputable. What's indisputable is that earth sciences professors, in fact, all natural sciences professors in the universities, astrophysics, astronomy, microbiology, biology, zoology, any earth sciences, geology. So you've got a premise at the base of their thinking, and that premise is at the very foundation of everything that they do in their science. They believe, 201, every single one, that we are the first advanced race in the universe, which means that we know we didn't build the continents. We know we didn't build the life forms that microbiologists are looking at in the lab, or that biologists are looking at in the field, zoologists. We know we didn't build anything we see in the natural world. We didn't build stars, space, galaxies. We didn't build any of it. And because we're the first advanced race, goes the premise, everything that we see in the natural world, on our world and other worlds in space, must have come into existence through natural forces. So this is the premise that is the problem, because when a geologist goes out onto the terrain, he's not asking a question. He's not saying, is what I'm looking at natural or artificial? He's saying, I wonder what mechanism was responsible for this feature right here. Like, what could I come up with to explain this feature? And that's what they do. So that's geology. And they also, then there's the memorizing of the names of minerals, which occupies the student's time. And that's what geology is. And it's like, well, then nobody's asked this question, is what I'm looking at natural or artificial? And I think that's the key.
Right. So like many other things, it's a closed loop system. And then you have to define whatever your findings are within the closed loop.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. So have you encountered pushback from traditional academics and said, oh, this guy's nuts, or has someone along the way said, hey, I've thought about that, but I never really wanted to bring it up in mixed company with my colleagues?
Well, the only reaction I've gotten so far is resounding silence from 80 Facebook ancient history groups. So I posted 700 different separate posts of videos, not just photos, but videos showing me going, hey, look, they built it in a riverbed or creek bed or around the world. So 700 separate posts, basically a few hearts, no conversation. And that was 2 years of work on my part to get all that stuff out there to the ancient history groups who say that they're interested in ancient history, but have no interest whatsoever in the fact that there's evidence that the earth is built. But if you post a picture of a mud fossil, you get 100 comments. I got 0 comments for 700 posts. So that's silence on the part of ancient history enthusiasts. Then the academics won't touch anything. They don't care what a playwright says. They have no interest at all in what I say. So it doesn't even matter. I could say something that sounds smart or sounds stupid. They don't care. I'm a playwright. Well, why would they care? They're busy with their students and their papers and their salaries. And they're trying to support their families, working hard as teachers. Okay. So that leaves random folks on the internets. And so I get comments like, you should take Geology 101. And it's like, well, that's the problem.
Yeah, right.
If I had taken university geology, I would have believed that these straight line, vertical lines that go through multiple layers of sedimentary material are cracks or fractures. They call them joint fractures. They have to call them joints because clearly the material is joined, but they call them fractures because if they just called them joints, then we'd know it was building. So they call them joint fractures, and that's an oxymoron. There is no joint that is a fracture, and there's no fracture that's a joint. If you go to a carpenter and say, I want you to build the table with these specific kinds of fractures, he'd go, you mean joints, not fractures. I don't build fractures. I build joints. I bring 2 sections, or sometimes 3 or 4, together in a joint. That's what I do. That's my specialty, and it stays strong. Well, that's what the ancients did. They brought their material together at joints. And I call them seams because they're like seams in a garment. So if you're a woman who has a beautiful dress, you're going to have there's going to be certain places where there's a seam and it's strong, and it joins these 2 pieces of material together. And that's what they did in the creek banks and river banks. And anyone can see this. It's just that we have the veil over our eyes, which is the veil of belief that we must be looking at something natural.
Right. So, Jock, I run into this problem at least once a show. And so this is where I have to essentially reboot for a second.
Okay.
Well, I apologize. And so go ahead and take a quaff of your beverage there. And I'll be right back. Don't go away. And we'll continue our scintillating discussion here with Jock Doubleday. Be right back.
Okay, I don't know. I guess it's okay. I don't know.
Okay, we're back. Thank you.
Sure.
Silence in and of itself is a very interesting response. Don't you think?
What was the word you said?
Silence in and of itself is an interesting response.
Yeah, I still didn't catch that word.
Silence.
Oh, silence.
Yes, in and of itself is an interesting response.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be that since I was posting videos, people are like, I don't really have time to watch a video. Maybe I should have just posted photos or something. But yeah, I mean, even my own mother is like, wait, you're saying that they built the continents? So I can't, there's not really, I don't have a huge support group out there, but it's okay. I think it's just hilarious that I'm out there, that a playwright, I see the comedy of a playwright telling all the geologists what they should be thinking about, but what I'm finding in the riverbeds, you see, I wouldn't have done any of this. I wouldn't be out in Texas in the riverbeds or doing cross-country trips in the U.S. in the riverbeds and creek beds and making videos if I hadn't had 17 months to think about this riverbed in Bosnia and go, maybe I should go down in it and see what it is. Maybe it's built. So as soon as I found a built riverbed in Bosnia, and then I saw that the Bosna River was built as well as the Fojnica River. So they come together in Visoko. It's just in the Bosna, there's a lot of water. You can't really see the structure as well, but in certain places you can see that they built it, and with diagonal sectioning. So you see the 45-degree to the flow diagonal sectioning of the building. That's the primary angle, and we find that primary angle in Rock Creek in California. So I have that video. We find the primary angle in all of the creek beds and riverbeds that I've explored in Texas is the 45-degree angle, and they crisscrosses. So as the river is flowing, you'll see these 45s, and as it goes around the bend, the 45s will follow it to some degree, and there are other angles that they use, but that's the primary one. So I'm in the riverbeds and creek beds going, well, there's evidence that it's built, because nature can't make 45-degree angles across its, there's no mechanism for it to make 45-degree angles across its riverbeds.
Right.
And there's no mechanism for it to make straight line seams through 1, 2, 3, 20, 30. I just did a meme yesterday, 36 layers of sedimentary material in Chute Canyon in Utah. And there's one line that goes through all 36 layers, and you're like, well, those are supposed to be time periods according to geology. So how do different time periods decide to put the same vertical line through every single layer? There's no mechanism for that in nature. So it has to be building. So it's like, well, I know it has to be building, but all of geology says that it's natural, and I'm a playwright. So that's where it stands,
Right. Well, when Velikovsky first started to unlock his theories, people thought he was mad, right? People didn't really believe him. And now Velikovsky's looking, there he is. He's looking more and more like, he was a prophet versus a poof, right? So there you go. Yep.
Yeah, and then you got Tom Van Flandern, you got Halton Arp. They're saying there's no Big Bang, seeing red, Halton Arp, static universe, Hilton Radcliffe, Big Bang never happened. So all these are really important too, because the Big Bang gives us a young universe, and that's an academic problem for humanity, because in a young universe, then we plausibly imagine that we're the first advanced race. But if we know that the Big Bang is nonsense, then we go, oh, well, as far as our science is concerned, real science, not Big Bang academic science, fairy tale science, but as far as real science is concerned, we have never found a beginning to the universe in time. That means that it's been around for much, 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 much longer than the Big Bang tells us, which means that there has been time for advanced races to technologically advance throughout time. So there could plausibly be many thousands, millions of advanced races out there who could have planet building skills. And if you want, I can go into Nikola Tesla's July 1930 article.
Let's go there.
Okay, so Nikola Tesla, some would say he's the greatest scientist ever to have lived. He wrote an article that went across the United States through the Hearst Publishing Company in July 1930, and it was called The Man's Greatest Achievement. And he said, that humankind's greatest achievement one day, not in his lifetime. He's working with wireless electricity, and you'd think that that's what he'd be talking about. I'm the greatest because he goes, it's easy. Wireless electricity is easy. We're doing it right now. It's not a problem. But our greatest achievement one day will be learning how to extract material from the ether, which, by the way, modern day academia says doesn't exist.
Right.
That's another problem. And we're going to learn how to build planets from the ether, which is an invisible fabric of the universe that scientists before controlled science of today all understood that light needed as a medium to travel through, and that we needed the ether as a medium. So it was obvious to the great scientists that the ether was existed, and Nikola Tesla called it the fluid ether. Some other scientists did too. And a fluid is a material. It's just that we can't see it. So therefore, academia goes, well, we're just going to do this thing called the Michelson-Morley experiment, and we're going to say, it basically says that there's no ether. So from then on, we're going to say there's no ether. And it's like, oh, so there's just a void out there, and the light travels through a void? How does it do that? Nikola Tesla said that light can be nothing else than a sound wave in the ether. and sound needs a medium, air. In this case, here in our world, it goes through air. So in the same way, he's saying light needs a medium, and it's traveling in the same way that sound does. So anyway, so he said, we're going to learn how to build planets from the ether. He said create worlds. Those are his words, create worlds. We're going to learn how to move planets, and we're going to become like, he said, we're going to sit, how did he say it? We're going to be next to our creator because of our power. So our creator is sitting here, and we're not below our creator. We're next to our creator. It's like, what? Next to our creator? That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It's the whole concept of ether is fascinating, because once you take ether out of the mix, you've got the four elements, which kind of, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to be locked into the physical world, but it locks us into the physical world, and it takes that quote unquote spiritual layer off the top. So we're really sort of boxed in a lot of ways without that fifth element. Do you think that ether is a combination of all the other four elements combined in a rarefied or sort of distilled form?
That's a really cool idea. I never thought of it. I've had in-depth conversations with Goran Marjanovic in two articles that are interviews with him called The Scalar Conundrum. And one's about the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. The second one's about Nikola Tesla. So people can find The Scalar Conundrum. And he talks about, I mean, he's getting down to the very fundamentals of the universe. And it's difficult because to try to understand it as humans at all, but then he's speaking Bosnian, Serbian, Serbo-Croatian, and his English is pretty good. And I'm trying to get metaphors from him that will help me and anyone else who reads the articles understand what he's talking about, because he's so deep in it that his language is mostly mathematical and really jargon based. And it's like, he just sent me an article a couple of days ago, and I was like, holy Moses, there's so many words I got to learn in this article. It's all about the ether. Because I said, what's a good article in the ether? And he sent me his own article. And he's like, this is the latest on the ether, because he's furthering Tesla's research. So he's literally on the forefront of ether research.
Right.
And it's like, it's so complicated. And it's like, oh God. So I don't know, I'm trying to learn it myself,
Right. So do you have some visuals that you want to share, like, with what you're talking about, and give people an idea of what you're experiencing in these lake beds, or these river beds rather?
Yeah, absolutely. I can show you some evidence of artifice across the world. So we'll just go to, let's see, it says mute website notifications. No, not now. Allow StreamYard to see your account. Doesn't say select window or screen.
There's a present at the bottom. Do you see that?
Yeah, I'm allowing. I think it should work now.
There you go. All right, let's bring you onto the stage there.
Can you see it?
I just see you and me. We're doubling up here.
Okay.
So you have to find something on your desktop,
all right.
or in as a file.
All right. Let's see.
And if not, I can always go to one of your videos and put it up here. We can play one of your videos.
It says you are sharing your entire screen.
Yeah.
Let's see. Refresh folder. Looks like you haven't started Firefox in a while. Okay, let's see. So, can you see it now, or?
So I'm seeing like me and you doubled up. Let me do this. I'm going to take this off. Hold on one second. Let me just do this. And I'm going to do something. I'm going to go into YouTube, and I'm going to look for one of your videos.
Okay.
Which video would you recommend me to pull up?
Toward the Golden Age.
All right, let me do that, and then we can play that, and then we can stop and start, and you could comment on whatever you need to bring up here. So let me get in here.
Okay. It's the very first video that starts playing automatically. It's like the featured video. So That could help you.
So I have ancient alternative history of the Bosnian pyramid complex, a hollow earth. That's the first one that pops. Then there's who built terrace continents. Let me just do this. Hold on. Let me just type in here. And towards the golden age.
Toward the golden age, no S. Toward the
all
golden age. So
here it is, right here. Terraforming of the earth, flowing toward truth. Is that one? Is that a good one? Hold on.
That's a different one. That's a different one. But
here it is. I got it right here. I got it right here.
Okay.
We're good.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen. It didn't work, so I'm going to stop it anyway. There.
Okay. All right. So let me do this. We're going to go to right here, and so this is by the way, there's a link to Jock's channel in the notes, and so there we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want me to just hit go, and then you can? Sure. All right. Let's do it.
Now, I just want people to remember that I do see the comedy of a playwright talking about geology.
20, and we are here inside a little nameless creek in Gillespie County, Texas. And we today, together, are going to diagnose the ancients' continental terraforming. Let's begin. So here we have this diagonal seam. It's a 45 to the flow of the river. And I've documented diagonal seams in many, many videos, okay? And that line keeps going, keeps going, keeps going through many different time periods according to geology. Now you can see the diagonal construction of these primary layers, right? So that's a 45 to the flow of the river. Let's move back so we can see that more clearly, okay? So the creek, the flow of the creek is that way. We have that 45-degree construction. We move down. And we see again this 45-degree construction. They're building left to right. So we can see that 45 there, right? Same 45-degree sectioning. More diagonal seam construction, okay, in this primary layer. So there you have a 45 to the flow of the creek right there through many different layers, through many different, quote, time periods, according to geology. It's one line. And that's a 45 that goes the opposite way of this 45. What we find is diagonal construction mixed with other angles, but the primary angles are diagonal. So these big, heavy primary layers have this diagonal seam, right? Not fractures, but diagonal seams, right? They're so integral that we can barely even see them. Here's one that's we can kind of make out here, but it's really, really integral, super strong. But they did build from left to right. They weren't magicians. They had to go section by section. So this is your section break right here. It's diagonal, 45 to the flow of the river. You can barely see the seam because it's so integral. Now, geology will call this a crack or a fracture, okay? That's the only way they can describe that. But look, see this seam? Watch what happens. Next layer, same line. So we know that that's not natural. Natural geology, the forces of nature, cannot make one straight line through many different time periods, and that's exactly what that line does. Here's another diagonal to the flow of the river, and we feel the regular quality of this section face right here. And that line, as I said before, goes all the way through all those layers. All these lines are traveling through many different layers, impossible for nature to do. Nature isn't making vertical lines through its horizontal material, okay? Now we have a combination of angles. Okay, we have this primary 45-degree construction. Then we have this right angle to the flow of the river, right angle to the flow of the river. So mixed with the primary 45 is right angles to the flow of the river, to the flow of the creek. We see the side, the smooth, essentially regular side of this section here. We see the smooth, essentially regular side of this section here, right? That's the beginning of the diagnosis of any creek bank or river bank, is to look at where the section breaks are. There's the section break. How do we know it's a section break and not a crack? Because it's at a 45 to the flow of the creek, okay? Could a crack be at a 45 to the flow of the creek? It could. Could it transverse many different layers of geological material? It could not. It's that same line transversing those layers tells us this is terraforming. It must be terraforming. It must be.
Okay, I got to stop it there just for a second, because you're proving with 3 separate examples that these lines are cutting right through all these different layers.
Right. And so to be out there with no authority as far as the common or as far as academia or the common man or common woman is concerned, I have no authority. I'm a playwright. So I'm out there going, well, it's obviously built, but who's going to believe me? You know?
Right. All right, let's play a little bit more. This is really fascinating.
Conscious building, okay? So that's the beginning of the diagnosis, and then you can go to, well, look at the softness and hardness of the layers. So they had different hardnesses and softnesses, right? So here we have many different thin, softer, chalky layers below this hard layer, right? So this is slowly eroding out. And I've talked about ecological terraforming in many of my videos, whereby this sulfate-rich gypsum is washed downstream to fertilize vegetation. So this is conscious ecological terraforming. The harder layers stay strong, the structural layers stay strong, the soft earthquake mitigating layers slowly, daily fertilize the land, okay?
So this is almost like a shock absorber in here, isn't it? This is what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, the softer layers in Bosnia and in Texas and wherever I find soft layers alternating with harder layers, they presumably are for earthquake mitigation. Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
But then they also
and you can
act.
see that, of course.
I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
But then they also act as the softer layers also act as soil creation mechanisms, you know, and it's like there's no moving parts in the sense of a machine that could wear out. The rain is always going to be there, and it's always going to create a little bit more soil each day from these softer layers.
Fascinating.
If you're not yet convinced that this is terraforming because you're new to my video series, well, let's look at these layers, okay? Now, if this was geological material, those layers would continue across, right? But they don't. That's one geology, we call it a stone, but it's concrete. It's one section of concrete next to a section that has many different layers in it, right? One layer, 7 layers, something like that. And then we have the straight lines that go through many different time periods, right? Many different quote time periods, because they're not time periods. This was all laid down at once. In other words, they laid down a section. Let's say they laid down this section with its corresponding 45s to the flow of the creek, right? Then they laid down that section. So they're laying down cakes, different layers. So these layers do not match this layer, and that's impossible for geology to do. Because the creek has eroded out the softer gypsum layers, as the ancients meant the creek to do, we're able to see below the harder capping layer of super hard, highly corrugated concrete. So the tops of those are highly corrugated. The top layer is highly corrugated. I call it a capping layer. And then we can see the diagonal construction of the sections, right? So we see the 45 to the flow of the creek. And we move to the next section because they did build left to right or right to left, obviously. And we see the face of this capping layer, right? Very regular face right there. It's at a 45 to the flow of the creek. Now, this highly corrugated material would be expected to have, if it was geological, natural, it would have incredibly angular, chaotic cracks in it. But that's not the case at all. It's not chaotic on the section face. So you can see the diagonal construction even in the creek bed itself, and this capping layer is plateauing. So I've called the stepping that the ancients do in their creek beds and riverbeds plateauing. So this capping layer is one essentially flat plateau, and then below it is other material, right? And then they'll keep stepping down using capping layers at the top. But what's interesting is that the capping layer and the material below it also has a diagonal construction.
So Robert,
right?
Yeah.
Then,
so just so your audience knows, the capping layers that are so highly corrugated, that are on top of all the other material wherever they find themselves, presumably the capping layer is meant to slow down water, so that's why it's so highly corrugated. So they're trying to slow the water down so that it doesn't take their hillsides out from the side.
And you made an interesting comment that the capping layer at the ridge of the creek bed is concrete. Like, these are not like marble or granite boulders. This is concrete. And I think you made the same connection with Enchanted Rock, didn't you?
Yeah, concretized material. I just call it concretized material because, like, in Bosnia, it's concretized clay, pure clay. In Enchanted Rock, it's concretized pink granite. And here in just a little ways south of Enchanted Rock, where I live, all these creek beds and riverbeds are made of concretized gypsum blocks that alternate with the softer layers. And you know, geology tells us that layers compress, the sedimentary layers, which is what this gypsum is supposed to be, compress over time and become hard. And that makes sense. That's reasonable, totally reasonable. But why would you have a hillside composed of a really hard, compressed layer of concretized gypsum, and then why would the next layer below it, which should have been even more compressed, why is that soft? And then there's another hard layer that is compressed, but then below all that weight is a nice soft layer again, and you're like, why isn't nature compressing this layer? And so it just keeps alternating, hard and soft, you know.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right, let's play a little bit more.
Okay.
And then I'm going to come back, and then I may start to ask you some of the more difficult questions about this, not to challenge your theory, but the who and the why behind it.
Okay.
That's where I want to go. Okay, so let's play a little bit more here.
Okay.
And translates into the diagonal construction that we see in the creek bank. So it is a diagonal job, but we do see the diagonal construction. So there it is. And that's the flow of the creek, and there's the diagonals. All right. So we see them layering, we see them building in sections, we see the insistent diagonal construction, we see the point of that section pointing into the creek, telling us this is diagonal construction, this is built. We can move up here and see what else is happening. Yeah, we have another diagonal line to the flow of the river. Next to it, another diagonal line to the flow of the river. And the seam is so integral. It's joining together two sections with a slight little smooth-faced section there. so we can see the section.
Now, some people would say, well, that's just a crack, but you're finding them in a very consistent pattern over the sort of the sweep of the creek bed, right? So it's not like, well, this crack is going this way and it's anomalous, or this fissure is going this way and it's anomalous. They're all kind of aligned in a very uniform direction.
Right. They're aligned, and they're also joined in an integral way, so that geology wants us to believe that the continents are breaking apart and that everything's joined by these fractures and everything's crumbling. But if you look at this, you can see how integral it is. There's no way that you could call that a fracture if you just had an open mind. You'd have to say it's a seam. And if you say it's a seam, then you go, well, if it's a seam, then who joined it, and who made the not perfectly smooth in a Grecian Roman way, but a perfectly regular right-angled face that you can see sort of jutting out on the left on the left section there, because they didn't meet flush. One's a little bit higher, and you can see that if we could take one section away, you'd have a regular face, and we can see that in various places in this video. You can see where some blocks have come out, and you can see the interior of the building, and you can see, oh, it's a regular right angle face. Well, how is that happening if it's a fracture? Because that should be random.
Right. Absolutely. It should be random. Okay. Is there more in here that if I needed to advance to that you would want to point out?
No, that's all of it. Then I just start proselytizing at the end. It's unbearable. It's unbearable.
Okay. All right. Let's get into the gritty. Let's
Okay.
get into gritty on this. All right.
Let's do it.
Who is responsible for all this?
I would suggest that it had to be advanced races in the distant past, and which races did this, I don't know. Some researchers call the builders the Paatal, Paatal. David Wilcox, his insiders talk about an ancient builder race, which may or may not be the Paatal. But I think the founders or the Paatal, and these are just words. I mean, it doesn't really explain anything. It just brings some words to the conversation, but that'll help people research. PAA was one word, TAL is another, Paatal. And then that's from Alex Collier and from other researchers. And then the founders is from other insiders in the secret space program, who talk about this race that built macro objects, let's say, in the galaxy and the many galaxies, and then left. And where are they? We don't know. So no one knows who they are, the founders of this mysterious race. Well, but Nikola Tesla gives us a clue, saying, well, we're going to learn how to build planets one day. So if we can do it, and we're just barely coming out of barbarism in our race here on Terra, then advanced races who have been around for millions and billions of years longer than we have, obviously to them, building a planet will be child's play. So probably any race that's technologically advanced could build a planet in the same way that we would create a terrarium and go, hey, look at this cool ecosystem. We've got this fern and this turtle and this, or whatever it is, and so it's sort of cool. You have your own little ecosystem. Well, what if you could do that on a planetary scale? How cool would that be?
All right, I'm gonna throw out a heresy here, and I want your thoughts on this.
Okay.
What if the builders and the terraformers were just a more advanced version of us, and that it's at a certain point in time we lost touch with that, or something came in and blinded us with science? What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, we're so deep in this in the Matrix, Robert, which is basically all it is blinding us from the truth, to quote the Matrix movie.
Right.
So we're like, we have no concept of our power,
Right.
and what we really are. So are we really just a biological organism that lives and dies, and that's the end, or are we an an immortal soul who have had many past incarnations? who could have done exactly what you said, who could have built planets and done all sorts of things.
Because if Tesla was onto it, right, there must have been other people who predated Tesla that must have known about this. I don't know where you are with the whole Tartaria thing, but when you go into a deep dive into that world, number one, they talk a lot about ether. Ether's a really big concept in the Tartaria world. Concrete and brick are really big, and Tesla comes up as a kind of enigmatic person. Like, is he real? Is he the front man for all this technology that they're trying to get patents on? Is he the guy that they bring in to try to understand and deconstruct the technology that they stumble upon? Right? Like, it's a very interesting sort of exploration of who Tesla is. So if let's say he's the guy that they bring in, say, hey, what do you do with this? Right? We've just found all this stuff, right? Like, well, who made that stuff? Was that us? Did we get a kickstart from somebody else? I mean, I just think that sometimes, and I had a guest on a few years ago. His last name was, I forget his first name. His last name was Murphy, and he was really, really interesting. And he flipped it back on me about this idea that there was something. And by the way, I'm not opposed to this idea of a creator race. So I'm not saying no to that. But he said, well, what if that was us? Right? And what if our story was corrupted somewhere along the way? And we have this, to your point, right? We have this incredible ability, and that we've just been dumbed down. We've been told a bunch of lies. We've embraced some, very, I don't know, judgmental mythologies along the way. And that it obfuscates, really, in a lot of ways, who we are. So again, I am not opposed to this idea of something coming in, creating a world. Something was created here. I'm just thinking, throwing it out there. Like, was it something external from us, or maybe it might have been us in another incarnation?
Right. Well, I mean, I think it could easily have been us and various researchers and contacts.
Maybe it was you. Maybe you were there, and now you're uncovering this, right? Like, you're on the trail of your own genesis at a certain point in time.
I mean, there is evidence that we have done a lot of the building on the planet.
Right.
in past lives, and I'm not going to go into my own personal story, because then people will be like, "Oh, he's just masturbating."
I want to hear. Let's hear your personal story. We love it.
I'm not going to go into it because it's not what we would call scientifically
germane.
verifiable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, but I think that enough people have talked about this, and even Alex Collier, who's got incredibly good information, and I listen to his videos every single day. He's got new questions and answers every single day, and people toss questions at him, and he comes up with the most amazing stuff every single time. He says that the Patal, I was just reading that yesterday. The Patal we were the Patal. We were the Patal.
Oh, that's interesting, right?
Yeah. But okay, so then you go, okay, Nikola Tesla's a key, because you're talking about Tartaria and all these things, and Nikola Tesla is a key. Now, what we know about him is that he always said, "My brain is a receiver."
Yeah.
Everyone said, "Tesla's a genius." He never said, "I'm a genius." He said, "My brain is a receiver. I'm getting blueprints, and then I make the machines. I decide if I can make them, and then I go, yeah, I can make that." And he makes the machine. Now, if I got blueprints from somewhere, I would just be like, "I don't know what to do with this. I'm an idiot. I'm a playwright." But he's the man. He's smart enough to figure out what to do with these blueprints and to turn them into technology that can help humanity. So where is he receiving the blueprints from? Well, there's a site called the Tesla Venus Connection, that has all the stuff that shows that it's a possibility that Tesla was brought here from Venus. And I have a reader that I've, this is going into a non-scientific realm as far as academic science goes, but a reader has told me that Nikola Tesla was brought here as a baby, as a physical baby. He didn't have his memories that he was a Venusian. He grew up as a human, a Terran human, and then they started sending him the blueprints. And he was here to help. He made that choice as a Venusian. He said, I'm going to go in, lose my memories, and I'm going to try to help humanity. You're going to send me the blueprints when I'm 18 or 20, whatever it was. So she says, that's what happened. They found him in a field. He was brought here and found in a field by these Serbian parents and raised as their own. Also, I recently asked her, I said, what's Tesla doing now? And people are like, but he's dead. What do you mean? What's he doing now? Well, if we're immortal souls, I want to know what he's doing now. Because if he dies on Earth, and by the way, he was murdered by Otto Skorzeny and Reinhard Gehlen, and Otto Skorzeny's deathbed confessions tell us that in detail, in extreme detail. And he even tells why he's telling this story to this guy who's interested in his daughter. This is Otto Skorzeny. He says that I'm telling this fellow on my deathbed about what really went on in my life, that I was an assassin along with Reinhard Gehlen to kill Tesla and take his, so the Luciferians could have his papers. Because I'm telling this story because they have not treated me well. They, his masters, the Luciferians, have not treated him well. And he's like, F you. I'm going to get back at you by telling the truth about what happened. We killed Tesla at the age of 86. So Nikola Tesla is a huge key to it all. Then you've got, I'm going to go off track real quick to John G. Trump.
Go. I was going to ask you about that.
Okay. So Trump's uncle, John G. Trump, was involved with, I think it was the CIA, as I remember. But anyway, he had access to Nikola Tesla's papers right after his death. So that's why the Trump family, have time viewing technology. There's other factions of humanity who have time viewing technology and time travel technology, but they have time viewing technology in the family. And that's why we're able to get out from under that's one of the reasons why we're able to get out from under the grip of the Luciferians, who have had control of our planet for tens of thousands of years. John G. Trump. So, and Trump mentioned John G. Trump just 2 weeks ago in one of his speeches. He's like, yeah, my uncle was a really good guy. And it's like, why is he talking about his uncle? Well, because we should go research John G. Trump, because there's a connection.
Right. What wasn't he? Didn't he come from MIT? But I think at that time the CIA might have been OSS or something like that.
Right. Office of Strategic Services. Yeah, and it sort of morphed into the CIA. So yeah, exactly. So Reinhard Gehlen and Otto Skorzeny worked for the OSS, which was under the Bush family control.
Right. Right. Interesting stuff. Wow. Really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
So okay. This is a personal question about your process.
Okay.
Because everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people will do research and they'll have kind of an intuitive hit about something.
Right.
And then the next thing that they know, they're, kind of going down a rabbit hole. And then all of a sudden, things just kind of open up. Oh, look what I found. Right. So what is that like for you in the field when you're going up and down these riverbeds, or you're exploring some of these ideas? How does that work for you? And when do you stumble upon something that's like, oh, I just found something bigger than I was looking for?
All right. Well, this is really interesting. You asked the best questions. I mean, this is probably interview 35 or something on ancient history. And you ask really great questions. So, because you've done the research, and most of the people who interview me don't know, they haven't done any research. They just heard about this guy,
Right.
You know what to ask. So this is great. So for people's understanding of why a playwright is talking about this, like why would a playwright take on all of geology and say, hey, you guys, it's actually built. So first of all, let me just say that geology does have its place. It came in later. So let's say that the continents were built. Let's say that the planet was built. People can say yes or no to that, but let's say that the continents were built. not reshaped, but built in their entirety. All the features were built in distant times, let's say 4 billion, 5 billion years ago. So Vanessa Lyle says that the planet's actually 6 billion years old, but let's go with 4.54 billion years, academia's age for now. So at some point in the distant past, the continents were built, and let's just suppose that. Then the question is, I'm just trying to get back my train of thought because I lost it for a second there.
We're talking about your discovery process.
Right. So and then let's say that a random person goes to Bosnia, discovers there's a built riverbed, follows the riverbed out to see where it becomes natural again, cannot find the fucking place where it becomes natural again because it's always built, no matter how far outside the Bosnian pyramid complex it goes on the Foinica River. I explored the main tributary of the Foinica. There's 12 tributaries, and I explored the main one, the Dragica, and that's on video, and Dragaca, and that's built too, which means the hills are built too, because the riverbeds are foundations for hills or whatever structures alongside them, a pyramid, a hill. So they're foundations for the structures alongside them. So you're like, okay, well, so I couldn't find an end to the building, and then it's like, well, how far does this go? How far does the building go in Bosnia? And I thought, I wonder how far it goes. I mean, maybe all of Bosnia is built, And I just started thinking about this, just wondering. I wasn't planning on finding built continents everywhere. I thought, well, that's a large scale project. It can't go very much farther, So I just went to Serbia, which is eastward from Bosnia. I spent some time there and did some explorations, and everything I found was built based on the training I'd found in the Bosnian pyramid complex. Based on that training, otherwise I never would have seen it. I would have just thought, oh, that's just a natural feature. So, and I've got videos documenting all this, and people can say yes or no to it. That's up to them. Then I went to Michael Tellinger's to work with Michael Tellinger in South Africa, and the hills in Waterval Boven, where he lives. I found that their layers are inclined toward the center of the structure. So no matter where if you're facing the hill and you go around the hill, no matter where you are, the layers are inclined, steeply inclined. And that's exactly what they are in Bosnia. I left that out. So these layers, these hard structural layers in Bosnia, these baked claystone layers, they're not level like we would make them. They're inclined into the structure so that if there's an earthquake, they just wedge in stronger. And
Wow.
They've got the soft layers underneath them, and they're just going to slide on those soft layers and wedge in. And that's the way the hills are built in South Africa. So I got that, the Elands River exploration, people can find that. But then I came back to the States on finding the same thing. And so when I was in Africa, I thought, I don't want to be the continental terraforming guy that says that everything is built, because that just sounds crazy. And then I don't want to think that everything is built, because that's too weird. Who is building this stuff? How did they do it? And where did they get the material? So that was before I read about Tesla's article, Man's Greatest Achievement, where he says that we're going to learn to extract matter from the ether by whirling the ether in a helical way. And we're going to learn how to build planets from the invisible fabric of the universe, the ether. So now that I know that he said that, at least there's some authority behind a playwright going around, hey, they built it all. Where would they get the material? Well, he says from the ether.
Right. So along the way, you just kept getting some form of affirmation that you were on the right trail or you're on the right path.
Well, I didn't even want to get it. I was like, please don't show me that the next thing I find is built, because that's going to freak me out. It was freaking me out, man.
Yeah.
But eventually I was just like, you know what? I'm finding diagonal seams. And then I looked back on the riverbed in Bosnia and I said, oh my God, those are 45s too. I didn't even notice that when I was there. Only when I came to Texas and saw the 45-degree angle building, I was like, oh my God. And then, so all these correspondences, little by little, I'm just like, oh, I guess I got to write a book because I should probably tell the world that the planet is built if they're interested. It probably doesn't really matter for people going out on a hike, whether it was built or natural. They're still going to go, what a beautiful mountain, what a beautiful lake, what a beautiful riverbed. They're not going to care if it's built or not, really. So it's not crucial information. It's not like timely political information where you're like, we got to get this politician in there or otherwise we're doomed. Well, it's like, well, so my information is kind of like, it's like this marginal stuff that people are like, oh, that's kind of interesting and weird, and maybe I'll look at that, maybe I won't. Who cares, really, you know?
Yeah. Well, okay. So being in Texas, as you well know, this is a very religious Christian part of the world. And their belief around the creation of this world, not all of them, but some of them will entertain this idea of intelligent design.
Right.
Right. So is the concept of intelligent design that far off from what you're actually talking about?
Well, that's a really good question. And so in my book, Artifact Terra, I deal with this even before I get to the chapters. I deal with it in the introduction because it's important for people to know that my book or my theory is not about an omniscient or omnipotent God magicking a world or the universe into being. Because of what I'm finding is meticulous building that is section by section. Would an omnipotent God need to have built section by section? Here's a section of really heavy concrete that we magicked from the ether. And then there's another side. I mean, if you were God, wouldn't you just build the hillside? Why would you build in sections that sometimes the sections are just a few inches wide? And then how many sections are you going to have? Trillions and trillions and trillions of these sections across the continents, building riverbeds, hills, riverbanks, hills, and those are the foundations for mountains. So it's like, why is God building in sections? So it's like, to me, it's like the evidence points to. I don't have the memo or the video of anybody building anything, but it points to building by advanced races. Also, the Bosnian Pyramid Complex, this is important because those pyramids are different from the pyramids around the planet that we find. So the pyramids in Bosnia are more part of the landscape. And you could just call them hills if you wanted to, but some of those structures do have a pyramidal feel to them. And the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is the notable one that looks a lot like a pyramid from certain angles. And it's like, okay, let's call that a pyramid. But it's really, I call it a late stage terraforming project. So I think that if it's 34,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, 34,000 years ago, 35,000, then, and it's carbon dated to 34,000 from fossilized leaves they found between some blocks. Then we could say, well, the terraformers, the creators of the continents, the continent builders, because I think of terraforming as continent building, whereas most people think of terraforming as bringing oxygen to the atmosphere. But so the terraformers, the ancient terraformers, were working through time and doing repair projects. So I would call the Bosnian Pyramid Complex a late stage terraforming project. Is a repair job. Now, one of my readers has said that there's a temple complex below the Bosnian Pyramid Complex. And I've only said this in a couple other interviews, so that the truly ancient temple complex has never been discovered in modern times. And above it is the new 34,000-year-old Bosnian Pyramid Complex that was meant, I believe, to hide this ancient temple complex. So you've got this new structure, and the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is the vantage point for everything around it for the whole country. You can see everything, and that's why the kings of old put their castles up there. So it's so high, and Visoko means high in altitude. So the town of Visoko is talking about, hey, we can get up on the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun and see everything. Why can they see everything? Because they built on a previous temple complex that was already at the regular level of the land, the regular altitude, and then they're going to build another huge bunch of structures, so it's going to be higher than everything else, you know.
Very interesting. I interviewed him, by the way, back in 2014.
Send me a resume.
Yeah.
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 Cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Time's gone by quickly. Can we talk about Enchanted Rock for just a second?
Yeah.
I mean, if people who may not be from this part of the world or aware of Enchanted Rock, it is such an anomaly because everything is so incredibly flat. And then all of a sudden you come upon this incredibly large, almost like a rock or cement dome that just kind of arises out of nowhere. And then there's a lot of really interesting things kind of around Enchanted Rock in terms of plants and other rocks, which some of the other rocks are Enchanted Rock are like weird looking. Like there's one that I'm sure you're aware of it. As you start to go into the park, you take that left, you start to go the trail, right? There's like that one rock that comes up and it almost looks like a hammer or something, right? Do you know that rock I'm talking about?
I'm not sure. Are you talking about the ones with the scoop marks?
Yeah. So it's a really bizarre play because there's really nothing else like that in this area. Yeah. So what, and you live near there and you've spent a lot of time climbing around that terrain. What is your take on Enchanted Rock?
Well, I've been there several times. I made a shot video footage one day. I was there for several hours and I lost all that footage for reasons that I won't go into. And so I've been there many times and I've got several videos out there. Enchanted Rock Revisited is a good one if people want to check that out. You see, I get bored easily, so I'm exploring all the riverbeds and creek beds within a certain radius of numbers of miles from my house. And now it's up to about 80 miles. I've explored all the ones that are publicly accessible. And so I'm jonesing for some place to go. And Enchanted Rock was one of the first places that I went that was near. You know, it's only about 20 something miles, 25 miles north of where I am. So I was like, oh, this place looks cool. It's domes, lots of domes, and not just the huge one behind you, which is the main one that people go to and take their families up and go, hey, we're on a dome, and they got their dogs with them. It's a day out. But there's more than one. There's lots of domes. And it's like, what is this? And so if you step back and you look at the map, you go, okay, it's about a pentagon. It's about 25 square miles in the shape of a pentagon of pink granite domes and other granite features and pink granite features. And you're like, that's cool. I wonder why that's there in the middle of a bunch of gypsum. I mean, mostly it's just gypsum out there. And then suddenly there's this pink granite stuff. And so geology says these are granite burps, and that's their terminology for these granite burps. And it's like, okay, but I knew before I even went out there that it was artificial. And you're like, but how could you know? You're just a playwright. You're an idiot. Geology knows that these are natural. They're granite burps. It's like, well, I just went to Google Earth and I saw that they had like these straight line seams that were like 50 or 100 meters long. And you can see them in that structure behind you. You can see these long parallel lines, and then, some will come and meet this way. But it's like molten material cannot have straight lines in it.
Yeah.
Because it's igneous rock. So the geologists don't care. Because if they did, they would have figured this out. They just don't care. They're just like, we're going to call it a granite burp, and that's all. See you later.
Right.
But can I ask a question as your student, sir? What about the straight line and then the right angle faces of all the concrete blocks throughout the complex of 25 square miles of blocks that have right angles, that regular faces? And they're like, oh, we're not going to entertain that question right now. We're just going to memorize names of minerals today. Okay, thanks, sir. I mean, it's so obvious to me that it's embarrassing to have to point it out. And it's embarrassing to talk to a geologist because I'm like, do you not see this? And of course, they have the authority and I'm nobody. So that's where it stands.
I remember you were hiking around there trying to find an entry into the rock, which has been talked about. Did you ever stumble upon that?
Yeah, I was looking for a tunnel because from Semir Osmanagic's work, he said that he knew there would be a tunnel system below the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, because in all his 10 years of visiting pyramid complexes around the world, South America, Central America, there was always a tunnel system involved with ancient pyramidal structures. And so I thought, well, this dome complex, they're not pyramids, but it's an ancient sort of complex. And I thought, I bet you there's some tunnels under there. And I started researching, and I found, well, there's some silver mining tunnels, and you never know for sure if those are repurposed ancient tunnels or if they were
Right.
actually dug by the silver miners themselves. But the locations of all these tunnels is very sort of lost in history, even the modern silver mining ones. So nobody knows where the tunnels locations are. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go look for some tunnels because, so I just wandered around, couldn't find any tunnel entrances. I looked as hard as I could for somebody who was out in the hot sun. I know it sounds self-serving, but it's like when it's 100 degrees and you've been out for hours and you only have a certain amount of water. It's like, how many tunnels can I try to find on this much water in this much heat? So anyway, I did my best. I asked a guy who has remote viewing. He said the tunnel entrance is actually on private land across the highway to the east, and that's where you're going to find a tunnel entrance. But I can't get on the private land, so
Interesting, really interesting. Well, Jock, this has been a really fascinating story. And what's next for you? Where are you going to go? 100 miles out, 120 miles out? Are you going to maybe check this out in other states? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, it took the last time I went, it was 3.5 hours north to the Brazos River, Brazos, where it meets the Paluxy. And I've done a video on the Paluxy River, which I think people would really like. And it shows the pointers into the creek, the diagonal pointers. So let's say you're looking at the river from the Paluxy River from above, you'll see on the banks this sawtooth diagonal 45-degree angle pointing of the sections that are still left, and then they're really super hard concretized gypsum or limestone, and below them is a soft layer of earthquake mitigating clay. So in that location in Texas, the ancients were using clay as the soft earthquake mitigating layer, whereas where I am, 3.5 hours south, they're using soft crumbly gypsum as the soft earthquake mitigating layer. But you see this clay layer, you can scoop the stuff out. It's so soft, and you're like, but how come the Paluxy River didn't take out that soft layer? Well, it did slowly but surely. It's just that this clay is so sticky. The etymology of clay is glue. So Proto-Indo-European language, gley, Gley, meant, well, it became two different words. It became glue and it became clay. So in history, clay and glue were the same thing. They thought of clay as glue. It was called gley. So this gluey, sticky stuff, this soft earthquake mitigating layer, is directly below these super hard pointers into the creek, and the pointers are giving us the 45s, the 45-degree diagonal construction. And you can see all the pointers. Meanwhile, the volunteers who were cleaning out the dinosaur footprints, none of them were looking at what I was looking at. That was a day where they were celebrating having a nice day to clean the muck out of the dinosaur footprints, the Acanthosaurus. I can't remember the name of the dinosaur that made these footprints, but everyone was concentrated on that. And I was like, the creek was built in ancient times. I'm not going to tell anybody that. They're doing their thing, So, but exploration is actually secondary now to writing my book, Artifact Terra. It's going to take a couple of years because there's a lot of science. I have to get the Big Bang in there at the beginning of the book to say, look, they're giving us a young universe so that we think that we're the first advanced race and that there's no planet building races out there. That's why the universities, the controlled universities, are telling us that the Big Bang exists, because it's total nonsense. I mean, all these books show that the Big Bang is total nonsense. Eric Lerner's book, The Big Bang Never Happened, is a pretty great book. The Static Universe by Hilton Ratcliffe. Seeing Red by, there it is.
Right there you go.
Seeing Red by Halton Arp is a great book, and red refers to redshift. So he's the one that got excommunicated for finding that something called intrinsic redshift, which of stars. And so that's really important because the Big Bang is based primarily on this idea that redshift of stars is due to velocity away from us, and that has to do with the expanding universe. They're flying away. And he's like, no, the stars could have intrinsic redshift. And I show that. He says, I show that in this way. They go, okay, you now have no telescope time. We're going to ban you from the telescope because you found something against the Big Bang theory that we all love so much. So scientists who are finding evidence that contradicts the Big Bang just get excommunicated. So the real scientists are outside of academia, and they're writing books that some of us are reading, Seeing Red, Halt and Arp, and so that's important to know that we live in a universe at least of a lot longer time than we've been told, and maybe an infinite time. Maybe the universe has always been here. I don't know.
Right. Wow. Great stuff. All right. I got a playwright question for you before we go.
Okay.
David Mamet or Sam Shepard?
Oh, I would go with Sam Shepard because I feel more heart. I feel more emotion. I love both playwrights, though. I wouldn't want to give either of them up, really. Yeah,
I think they're both brilliant. Sam Shepard, to me, seems kind of more connected with this idea of America, right, for better or worse, right? Whereas Mamet is more of like the urban mind, right, and located in kind of a different place. But I think they're both brilliant. Are you still doing any plays?
I mean, I'm writing plays all the time. It's just that time is limited now because Artifact Terra, my book, is taking up lots and lots of time, which I love. It's great to be in a position where I can choose what wonderful thing to do today. I could go explore a creek and make another video showing what I've shown in 50 other videos. But really, why should I do that? Because I've already done it. I've already explained it, shown it.
Right.
People should check out the Rock Creek video because that's igneous rock. And you're like, but how are there 45-degree angle lines that are 30 meters long crisscrossing an igneous creek bed? The igneous rock should just be a mess of molten material. There can't be any straight lines in that, and they shouldn't be at 45s. Well, there they are. So I get to choose between writing Artifact Terra, writing a play, or writing a screenplay. It's all good for me, and I really appreciate your time, Robert, because you set up this venue or this space for people to set their ideas forth, and it's really important. Yeah.
Thank you. And the people who you probably aren't really interacting with, the chat group, they're all really, really bright, and they're all very independent thinkers. They don't always agree with each other, which is fine, right? It's all good, but they all have an insatiable curiosity and I think a willingness to question, so-called models of reality and authority. And so we all get together and have people like yourself on here, which you're part of the crew. So thank you very much for being here. And we have your YouTube channel linked so people can find you there. Any place else where people can find you?
If people want to check out my Bosnian Pyramids stuff, just go to youtube.com Bosnian Pyramids with an S. It won't come up if you type it, so you got to type the whole URL because they're suppressing it. Then there's An American in Bosnia. So the Bosnian stuff is on my Google blog spot thingy. And then the WordPress of the same name, An American in Bosnia, is more continental terraforming, artificial planet, Nikola Tesla. So the more recent articles are on the WordPress version of An American in Bosnia. So if people want articles, but I also embed the videos in the articles, so you get videos and text there. But if people want to go to my playlist, Artificial Riverbeds, on my channel, Jock Doubleday, my YouTube channel, they can go there. And I've also got a podcast called Transition to New Terra, and I occasionally, interview guests about alternative things, dragons, monoatomic gold, the soul, things like that. So
cool. Excellent. Jock, you're a regular Renaissance dude. So, good to have you here. I'm going to sign off with Tartaria and everybody else. Have a great weekend. God bless you all. Treat each other well. And we'll be back on Sunday night with Sunday Night Astro Live. In the meantime, go check out Jock's YouTube channel and maybe roll up your pants sleeves and get in a creek and find out for yourself. All right, everybody.